Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Ali Levine with me. Ali is a multitude of things, but celebrity stylist, breathwork coach, Bravo TV personality, and the founder of Ali Levine Design, and a mom. And so I'm super excited to get to highlight her story and journey through all of these avenues. But one of the things that I think you're going to take away from our conversation today is how every time you pivot, you're kind of reinventing yourself and taking certain things you've already learned and applying it to where you're going. So, Ali, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks so much for having me, Phil. Yeah, it's so true, right? Every time we go through a pivoting moment, it's like, okay, what am I learning in this moment? And then how am I going to rebuild myself from here? It's so true. And it's like I think about my life and I'm like, wow, this picture that I thought it was going to be, I had to like really surrender it and be like, okay,
Mm,
it's going to be completely different, but it's going to still be beautiful. It's like this new painting, right? Like I used to love doing oil paintings when I was a kid for many years. And it makes me think back to that of like, okay, it was never what I thought it was going to be when I was painting. It was actually way better and way more brilliant. But in
uh,
the mind, right? We don't think that way. We think like, oh, what's wrong? What's going on? But then when we can surrender, hence
mm,
your your moments as you spoke to what
yeah.
happens in your life, that true surrendering moment brings you to that redrawing and that aha moment where it changes and you're like, oh, there's that beautiful picture. I just didn't know it was there.
Yes, I love it. So speaking of being a kiddo, though, one of the things when you were early and young in life, you noticed that when people got dolled up or when they dressed a certain way, that they just smiled differently, they glowed differently. So talk a little bit about just picking up on that in your younger years.
Yeah, for sure. I think fashion has always been a part of my life since I was super, super young. My grandmother, who's on the other side now, and my very best friend, I watched her get dressed pretty much every morning and would just see how she would change from, her, comfortable pajamas and robe into just something fabulous and would be putting, a little bit of makeup on and she would just light up. And then she
Uh,
getting, her accessories together and I'd watch her in her closet and then, she'd take me to different boutiques and we'd go shopping with her and my mom. And I would just watch different people. I was a big people watcher, even at a young age, even if I didn't fully understand, like what was going on. I could just see the changes. And as I got older, I would start to say it, right? Because as kids, we just want to talk. We don't think about like, oh, I don't know this person. So I would just go up to people randomly, like, and when they be, getting changed, when they come out to the mirror and they'd be talking to a friend and I'd go over and I'd say, that looks really pretty on you. My mom would be like, give it space, and I'm like, I just want to tell them, like, oh, that color looks really nice on you. And so I think it was always within me. Like I always
yeah.
knew what fashion could do for people and what, the right colors can do for someone and, what that expresses. And I think as I, got older over time and working with different people, especially in the last few years, from my own like spiritual awakening and everything I've gone through, I think I started realizing like, wow, fashion and clothing and color can actually be really healing and it
Mm,
actually like can change the way someone shows up in their everyday and that there's certain colors we're drawn to for actual certain reasons of the frequencies that those colors hold and the mood it
interesting.
gives us and all of these things like so like for you you're wearing this beautiful like bright blue but this shade of blue is like a very calming color as well as a very compassionate color so someone receiving you maybe actually getting that and you don't even know that maybe you didn't actually think about that when you put it on but
Yeah.
the color has that vibration and that frequency happening so it's being received to someone else who maybe needs that or maybe for
Mm,
yourself you needed that today and you didn't even recognize it and you put it on and so I've been learning so much about color and what that does and especially with just fashion in general like you said I've always said confidence is your best accessory.
yeah.
And, I realized that as I continued in my craft and as I, continue to work as a stylist, I would see people literally change, in a moment from where they were just by changing their wardrobe. And
Mm,
then, taking it deeper, being able to really recognize like, oh, these colors really light them up. Oh, these colors actually change how they feel. Oh, they're stuck in black. Why
yeah.
is and black lets people concave, it lets people hide. And there's nothing
Mm,
wrong with black, but getting stuck in it, right? Or getting stuck in any color, of what that's doing, this comfort level that really is doesn't need to be there. And so I think I've learned, over the years of dressing people, what these different types of modalities in fashion do for people. And it's not just clothing. Clothing is literally just the bare minimum of the actual changes of what happens. And your closet actually speaks so much to you. When you walk into your closet, whether you recognize it or not, those colors represent where you are in life and where you are in your story. There might be things you're holding on to that you don't need to wear anymore, or they don't even fit you anymore, but you're holding them because there's a story behind it. There's an attachment. And to me, that's like stagnant energy that needs to go and it's just sitting for no reason.
Yeah.
So it's been very interesting over the years as I've evolved in my own craft, seeing all these different levels of what fashion can do for people.
Absolutely. Now, I want to get into the fashion in a minute, but to start or to rewind, and before you get into your own fashion business, growing up, your dad was in the entrepreneurship world. So talk a little bit about, as a kiddo, being able to see, somebody kind of running their own business and the pros and some of the cons that maybe you were either subconsciously or consciously picking up on.
Sure, yeah. So my dad, watching my father from a very young age, he was always a super hard worker. I definitely got my, energy from that, and my attitude and the way I work, and just I think my overall getter attitude, I really learned from watching him, because
Mm.
he always was showing up and doing the most of what he needed to do and then some. And I just remember like him taking me to QVC, where he, is the number one vendor to this day. And I would, sit in the green room and watch him, train hosts, or he would go on himself and they'd be getting him ready, with his, touch ups on his face before he go on camera. And I would get to talk to the hosts and, meet people, even though I was like super young, didn't really know what was going on. And he'd introduce me to the vendors and I'd see all different types of products. And I think all that exposure really like showed me like, wow, what he does in the world, who he's working with, how this works, the relationships, the connections. And that was really cool to me. Working at his office was like really my first real job. I remember, many years ago, I wanted to buy like, I think it was a pair of Dolce & Gabbana jeans or Sashi, something like ridiculous. And I was like super young. And my dad was like, sure, you can get them. You can buy them. And I was like, I don't have any money. I was like, could you get them for me? And he's like, well, you can work and then you can take that money and buy
Yeah.
them. You're more than welcome. And I was like, oh, cool, great
Yeah.
concept. And so I started working at his office. And long story short, after doing an entire summer of working my butt off and learning and being exhausted and all the things, he's like, all right, you ready to get to go jeans? And I was like, no. And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I worked really hard for this. I don't want to go buy jeans.
Yeah.
And I think that was like a big lesson for me, was like, understanding how, that worked. And I think also like the shifting of like, because we were very fortunate, and, my dad did give us a lot growing up, and, we had friends that, also got to benefit in that and have fun with us on vacation and all, different things I'm grateful
Yeah.
for. But I think it also showed me like, oh, but that didn't just happen. Like
Yes.
he made that happen and he created that and he built that foundation for us. And so, yeah, I think that's one thing. And then the other side of it, like you said, like the pros and cons,
Yeah.
the duality of that, right, was watching him have burnout moments,
Mm.
and was really watching him sometimes just be so stressed out or upset that he couldn't be present at certain things, or he
Yeah.
couldn't do something that I was doing or my brother was doing or whatever it may be. And he really made it to so much, but there were still certain things he just couldn't make it to.
Yeah.
And I think, as a kid, right, you don't realize the impact that that actually has on an adult,
Yeah.
or a parent. And now, me being a mom, I totally get it and have like that empathy, for that situation, because I really do my best to be present in everything and I still can't be,
Yeah.
and so I think it's hard sometimes as parents, like you don't realize, in the moment, what you're maybe going through until you have time to reflect. Right. And so
Mm.
me as a kid, I think I just kind of saw that he sometimes couldn't be at certain things, or I would see that he was upset that he would miss something. And of course, I would understand and be upset as well, but I didn't really fully understand the full scope, of what he was feeling or experiencing. And that also, too, as I got older, I learned that he started getting into some meditation and different things because, he was having high stress and, he was needing to find ways, to help with that. So I think all those different things, right, those ebbs and flows, showed me along the way that different things he went through, and also what it took for him to build literally from scratch, from the ground up, building his company and, what that looked like. And I think a lot of it carried in to me. I think more of the workaholic side for many years, because I joke now that I'm a recovering workaholic,
Yeah.
because I used to just work, 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 and I had no work-life balance and no concept of presence or, being in the moment. And I think that motherhood was a huge part of that shift for me for the better.
Yeah.
And also you mentioned, the Bravo show. I think that was actually the start of it without me realizing it. And then it took me becoming a mother for it to actually settle in and marinate and understand what that was.
Yes, I love it. Now, in your journey, you had some corporate jobs to start with. So we did some Target, we did some Coach, different things there, but it wasn't your true passion yet. So talk a little bit about getting started in the corporate world and then navigating to something that maybe was more passionate for you and where you wanted to go long term.
Yeah. So, long story short, I really didn't know what I wanted to do in fashion. I went to a couple of different schools, but for story purposes, and Northern Arizona University is where I basically wound up and finished. And I ran the fashion program there. I ended up being the president of their
Oh,
merchandising and fashion club. So it was really cool. I got to run all the fashion shows. I got to meet all the buyers, work with the merchandisers. So Target, or as I call it, Target, ended up happening because I was helping students find jobs when they got out of college or internships. And they were at a meeting and their team was like, well, what about you? And I was like, what about me? And they were like, well, you're helping all these people. Like, like, what are you going to do? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I was like, I haven't really thought about myself. I've been thinking about everybody else.
yeah,
And they were like, well, would you be interested? And so I looked at the program, and it was an entire executive soft lines program where you basically learned how to be an executive, at the Target level in retail, a whole training program as an intern, logistics, merchandising, buyers, sales, you name it, all of it. And I was like, well, I don't have a job and it's like paid and it actually sounds like I could learn something. And so, I went into the interview and I ended up getting it. And so that's how I actually started with Target as an
yeah,
intern. And then after interning, usually you go kind of like to the next level of their like assistant management. But I guess I had done so well in their executive program, they actually graduated me straight into out of college, an executive program going back to New York, where I lived in the city. And I went and did their whole program of basically being trained to be a manager on the floor
yeah,
and an executive of soft lines. And I helped open their first flagship store in New York. And it was really an incredible experience, especially at a young age, getting
yeah,
to run a store, open a store, see how that all worked with the logistics, the trucks, the buying, the merchandise. I mean, building a team, teaching employees how to run the floor. I mean, all of it. So that was quite the experience. And that was where I started. But like I said, I really didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. So I kind of just got the opportunity and went with it because, hey, I could learn and have a job. And I didn't think I was going to have a job coming out of college. So
yeah,
it was just like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then after some time, I just started recognizing that I was burning out. I was doing almost 80 hours, a week,
yeah,
as retail does. And I was like, I don't know, 21, 22 years old. Like it was, I was still, let's be real, I was still partying. I was still
yeah,
being, young and dumb. So I was just like not fitting with my lifestyle. And I was just feeling like, there's got to be something else I can do that doesn't just exhaust me. And then I can't hang out with my friends on the weekends and all these things. Of course, looking back, I'm like, I probably could have stuck it out. And so, but it was, it was a learning experience. I did stick it out for almost 2 years. And then I said, you know what? I really want to do design. I studied fashion design in school. I studied, buying. I studied like way more of the detail than just, the fashion retail side of things. I want to be more in the creative. I've always
yeah,
done, sewing, all the things. So I asked Target. They were super cool. They were like, we love you. We don't want to lose you. We'll be happy to, talk about doing something in Minnesota for design. And they flew me out there and I had to check it out. Very cool spot. Wasn't for me.
yeah,
And I was just like, nope. That was kind of like my pivot. I knew I was no longer going to stay with Target because there were no more paths for me if I wasn't going to go do design in Minnesota.
Yep.
So I decided to leave, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And I just started applying for different design jobs, in New York City and all over the place in Jersey, and started getting callbacks and started going on interviews. And a lot of people wanted me, but everybody wanted to pay me for way less, because even though I was fantastic at my job and everything I'd done, I was new to the design world.
Yeah.
And that was like a really big, I think, like ego swallow for me, of like, okay, you're either going to stay in retail and make like really big money for a young 20-year-old,
Yeah.
but work insane hours, or you're going to take a step back and learn again and like probably cut, your paycheck by half, if not more, and start, from scratch
Yeah.
and go into design. And I really wanted to learn design. And so
Yeah.
I decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to see what happens, and I'm going to take the leap of faith. And I did. And I started working for a company called Fragments in New York first, which was a private label jewelry company. So I got to be a part of like doing their product development and private label. For anyone that doesn't know what that is, basically, I would do things for like Banana Republic, Abercrombie and Fitch, Saks, all these different companies, but they had us doing it, and then they would put their label on it. So I would
Yeah.
help with the designs of it, the packaging, everything. And then they decided, where it was going to go, what stores, all of that. So I did that.
Yeah.
After a little while, the company was just really, really small, and I wanted more opportunity. That's what then led me to coach. I started working with the non-CC team, which was basically the non-original coach team that wanted to try new innovative designs and ideas, which was perfect for me at that time because I wanted to really spread my wings and try all different
Yeah.
designs and ideas. So I got to be a part of that. And then the stock market crashed, and it was like everybody had no work.
Yeah.
And it was just like, talk about a surrendering moment and a pivoting moment.
Mm.
It was so hard in that moment. Like I remember calling my friend and being like, hey, can you meet me for a drink? And like meeting her at the bar and just like bawling my eyes out, because I
Yeah.
felt like I finally found what I was passionate about, and I was good at it, and I was loving it. And then it was taken away. And it
Yeah.
was really, really hard. And so when you talk about that moment of like, now looking back, I understand. But then it was really, really difficult. And I was just drowning in my sorrows for a little bit of time.
Yeah. Well, so an idea I want to highlight in what you just talked about, and I think a lot of people go through this at some level in their life, and that is you wake up one day and you say, how did I get here? And the realization is, for a lot of people, maybe they did just stick with a job or a career that they didn't love, and they did it because of the money. And now they've been doing it 20 years, and it's like, well, gosh, I can't pivot out of it now. No one's going to pay me what I'm making doing this. I can't take a step back. Or maybe they've been in a relationship for 6 years and they're like, I've just been content. I'm not even enjoying it, but the fear of the unknown is worse than staying in the contentment of the not enjoying the known. So talk a little bit about that, for someone that, once again, depending on how they're listening to this, is going through that in their life.
Yeah, it's so true. I think fear is such a, it's such a low vibration, right? But we all
Mm.
experience it, and we all allow ourselves to get stuck in it. And one of my spiritual mentors really, it really clicked for me one day when they said to me, when I was going through some different things and I was really feeling into fear, and they said, fear is just false evidence appearing real.
Mm.
And I was like, oh. And it's not to say, right, that there aren't real fears and there
Yeah.
aren't real things going on. But before it actually even has happened, our mind has told us that this and this and this is going to happen, because it's our mind and our ego's way of protecting us.
Yep.
But really, it's not serving us in any way. And if you can get like into your front lobe and actually get into the creation part of it and tell yourself, that's just something I think is going to happen because I don't know what's going to happen. And like you said, it's the unknown. And I need to have faith here and step into that versus, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to find something. I'll never be loved again. I'll never find a job, whatever it is that you're telling yourself in this moment. And I think we all get there, right? And there's no judgment around it, but it's understanding and having the awareness to a point that when you finally get sick of constantly being in fear and saying, how do I switch and get out of
Yeah.
this? And I think for me, that honestly has been a very long journey, because I think I stayed in that programming for quite some time, between just childhood programming that your parents are given from their parents and everything else, and everyone does their best, right? There's no right or wrong. It's just the way it's been. I do think it's starting to change now. More people are realizing your words have power. Energy is a real thing. If you can change your thoughts, you can change your life, and all that. And I think, at that time, I was too young to understand that. And I think it was more, I was just in a surrender moment, because I had lost, everything as far as my job was concerned and my income, and I was going to lose my apartment and all these things. And it pushed me into a surrender moment of like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Because I got to do something. Otherwise, it was like, there was no more. It was like, okay, something has to happen, or I got to move home. I am, I'm going to have to start over in something else. Like all the things, all the fears were coming up. And luckily I had different friends and family in the entertainment industry. And I called around and I said, hey, is there anything I can do for work? Because I'm out of a job. I don't have anything. I will do anything. I just need a job, And so I was able to interview with the great Oliver Stone for Wall Street Money Never Sleeps.
Yeah.
And he ended up hiring me as basically his, excuse my language, but bitch girl, if you will, like, you're gonna go get donuts and I need my coffee at 4 a.m. And it didn't sound exciting by any means, but it was a job, it was something, and it was an avenue into something new. And I had always been curious about fashion and the entertainment industry, but didn't really, fully understand it. And I thought, well, there's nothing corporate for me. Everything is a dead end. Everything I go to, nobody can hire me. So might as well, because like you mentioned, the cost and the other things, I would do those jobs for like a couple weeks and then they get rid of me because it was like temp work, and then they were like, sorry, we don't have the budget. You got to go. And I was like, okay, I can't, I can't sustain my, my situation right now with this. What can I do? So that was the surrender moment. And so then I started working for Oliver, and it was quite the transformative experience. It was like super holding myself accountable, having to be up super early, late nights, talk about going back to retail hours and then some.
You're like, what's an 80-hour week? I'm a 100-hour week.
That's right, exactly. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, who's complaining about that many hours? And it was like getting on the train, because I lived right outside the city, and doing all these things, but I was really learning and I was enjoying it, and I was finding new skills and everything. And so long story short, from that, after doing production assistant work, he was amazing and was like, hey, I know you really don't want to be doing the PA work. I know you want to be learning the fashion costume side. So he introduced me to the head costume designer, Ellen Moroznik, who's super famous, and she was amazing. And she and her team took me under their wing and let me start still doing like Devil Wears Prada work, but at least I got to do it in the costume department. And just started, working from there. And, from there, that was the pivotal moment that led me into the entertainment and styling world. Because after, quite a few jobs of being a shopper and being an assistant, I went to Atlanta. I worked on Big Mama's house, and that team was from Los Angeles. And they asked me to go with them to LA. And it was another like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to go for it moment. And I packed my bags, and luckily who's my husband now of many years, that was my boyfriend at the time, said, I'll go with you, and packed his bags, and off to, LA we went. And it was quite the journey. I was there for, 11 years, over a decade. And that was the moment that shifted me into, that industry. And I don't know if I would have ever wound up in styling and in entertainment had corporate not essentially kicked me out and had me, basically not have a job, or if in retail, I was able to go do design, with Target, and what I mean? So it's like, I think about all these paths that could have been and all these different timelines, and they didn't happen for me, and they didn't line up the way I thought they were going to, but it was that much better, And so I think that, like, when you're in a moment, it's hard to see that and understand that. And so I think honoring your feelings and processing that, like, this is hard and this is not easy, but then having the faith and the strength to move forward and say, but I'm going to trust that something better is on the way, something bigger is coming for me. And that's why these other things didn't work out. And I think that's been one of the big highlights in my own life of like with my spiritual journey, like now with being, like you said, breath work, practitioner and coach, and all I'm doing, breath work has been a game changer in my life, because anytime fear creeps in, or anytime doubt comes in, or things change in life, or whatever it may be, I'm able to surrender in my body and breathe. And when you consciously breathe, even more so than meditation, this has been studied over and over again with how our brain works. When you're bringing in more oxygen to the body, our neuroreceptors actually shut off in the back of our brain, and it allows us to move into elevated states of consciousness. And what does that mean? That means that all the thoughts, all the noise, everything going on shuts off, and you're actually able to be with yourself and only yourself in your body. And let me tell you what a freeing experience that is. And it has truly changed my life and everyone I know around me.
So two things that I want to point out. One was just your comment about, hey, when fear or bad things happen, you can have your moment, but it comes down to taking action, right? Because there's people that turn that from a moment into a life, right? They turn that from a moment into 2 years of, I didn't take action. I never met the Atlanta crew. I never went out to LA because I lost a job and I just was down and I didn't take action. So I think, so I think that's important. I think on the second part, and just kind of going into a little bit of the breathwork conversation, it sounds really good that I should take time and energy to be by myself and be in my thoughts. And I think to somebody else listening, they're like, that's the scariest place. I don't want to go there. I actually have things going on all the time, so I don't have to be with myself and be in my own thoughts, because then I'd have to do work, or then I'm going to have to, uncover some things about me. So talk a little bit about that for, maybe the person that hears that and they go, that's kind of nerve wracking.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great point and a great question. We love to distract ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I am so, guilty of this as well. And I think that when you get sick of your own shit, if you will, you decide, how do I pivot? How do I make this change? And I think, again, like being real about like where you're at, like for people that don't know me, before I got to this place, that's an ever evolving journey, I was not able to see things this way. I went through pretty heavy postpartum depression with my first daughter. And I think that during that time, I was very much the victim in my own life and in my own story. And every day I kept choosing not to show up for myself. And I continued to be in this spiral and, be in this depression. And of course, there's hormones and different things involved. But at the end of the day, I was still spiraling and letting myself stay there. And I wasn't doing anything to get myself out. And, that is really truly where my journey began, was getting sick of that. And then deciding, how am I going to get help? What am I going to do to move forward? And meditation was the first thing that truly saved my life, when it came to being able to, like you said, sit with yourself and do the work. And listen, when I was meditating at first, I would say I hate meditating. I would tell my therapist, I would tell my team, I had different people around me. I would tell them, I hate this. It doesn't work and I hate it. And they'd say, do it anyways. And I would literally write in my journal, I hate meditating, and, I would do it anyways, and it was because, like you said, the sitting with yourself, right? Of like having to acknowledge like, oh, these are my thoughts. I actually think about myself. And that was a big part of my journey too. It's like, when you have a thought, instead of just letting it sit and marinate, write out what you're thinking. And then I want you to actually say it out loud of what you actually think of yourself. And then ask yourself if that's true. And that was so hard for me. Like, I remember writing certain things down about like my body and just about myself, and like crying and being like, oh my gosh, I actually think these terrible thoughts about myself. Like, what is wrong with me? And it's like, nothing's wrong with us. We have so many programs running that have been there for so long. And it's like, you have to literally deprogram yourself and change those habits and change those patterns. And meditation allows us to do that and get into, the brain and in the mindset work. And that's why, breath work became so big for me, because then when mindset work truly felt like it stopped working when 2020 rolled around for most of us, I was like losing my ish. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I came so far. Why is this not working? What is happening? And I was starting to like spiral all over again. But luckily, I had the awareness and the shift, like you mentioned, of like, okay, I'm not going to be stuck in this. I'm not going to let this take me out. I'm going to figure out how to take action and move through.
Mm.
And that was when breath work truly started, showed up for me. I feel like, things show up in our lives for a reason. And it showed up in mine. And it was like, oh, I don't have to be stuck in my thoughts. I can actually get in my body and move through what's going on. And then the mindset work started working again because I was moving through it in my body. And I believe, in my humble opinion, our emotions are energy in motion. And so if you believe that you are an energetic being and everything is energy, then everything you hold is staying in the body. And everything you essentially don't express, the body is going to then suppress and find another way to express it through you. Disease, ailments, all kinds of different things that we see happen. And one of my favorite books I ever read was The Body Keeps Score. And that was a big change for me when I was reading that during my postpartum depression, because it was showing me like, oh, my cystic acne, oh, my inflammation, all these things that were happening. I was again becoming a victim to and was like, why me? Why me? Why is this happening? But I was doing it. I was creating it by not expressing what was going on, by not sitting with myself. And so I would say to someone, it is absolutely scary to sit with yourself and be with yourself and go through that journey. Hi, raising my hand. But two things. One, are you happy with where you are right now? Because if you're not, then it's time to make a change, regardless of what what that change is going to be. Yep. And two, taking yourself out of fear and moving into faith and trust, whatever that looks like for you, to trust that there is more out there guiding you and will help you once you say yes to yourself in that journey, whether it's God, the universe, divine, whatever it is for you, it's going to be there to support you when you say enough, and I'm going to show up for myself. I promise you that.
That's really good. I love it. So back to your journey, right? So we moved out to LA and we are doing, exactly what you want to be doing. And then you start getting the opportunity to style people in different red carpet events, and talk just a little bit about how kind of connections became for that and how you started running that type of business.
Yeah, sure. So I moved to LA and I started working with, all different stylists and designers. And over time, I just started getting asked to dress these like random, I hate to say it, but like D-listers, like nobodies, like, hey, they need an outfit for this, but they're going to this event. And like, what did I know? And I was like, okay, I was so excited to get the opportunity to dress somebody, like, hey, I'm usually standing here steaming these clothes or running around picking something up for someone else. Like, I get to do this, cool, And so I just started working, with these different people, and some of those people's careers actually, took off, what do you know? And so all of a sudden my name was getting attached to this person who's best dressed and this person who, hey, look what they're wearing. It's trending today, and whatever it was. And all of a sudden these stories were starting to link up with me and my name and what I was doing and what I was sharing. And Levine Design honestly was born. It was just like, all of a sudden I remember sitting at my little table in my condo at my townhouse, my husband in Toluca Lake. And I get a phone call. It was like a Saturday or Sunday morning, and we're just having breakfast. And I remember looking at him thinking I was getting pranked. And they're like, this is from the New York Times. And I'm like, the New York Times is calling me, and I'm like sitting there like, surreal, like there's no way. And they're like, we wanted to interview you, for this business feature and to talk about, what you're doing in fashion. I was like, oh, okay. And meanwhile, we had just moved into our place. I'm still like new. So we don't have, a huge budget. So our place is like pretty small, and there's like not that much around. There's barely any furniture. And they're like, can we come and interview you? And I'm like, okay. And like they come, and I'm like, hey, we just moved in and we have like this one table here right now. I'll never forget that, because like they literally staged me like right in front of the table. So whenever I see that picture, I chuckle, because it's like such a humbling moment of like, like here I was, like in this huge feature of like page 6 in print, but like I'm just getting like things off the ground and just getting to step into like this career and who I was, and I was very grateful for that, because And that took me into more clients and into more connections and, more people trusting in me and having, the credibility to get to work with people and their transformations and what they were doing. And that turned into, more press features and helping people with more red carpets and, their television shows and press junkets and, music videos, magazines, the list goes on. And I just kept, that season of my life was a very much yes season. I pretty much just said yes to anything that came my way to build my portfolio, to build my connections, to build relationships, to build credibility. And it was great because I got to meet so many people and have so many different experiences, good or bad, to learn how, that worked. And that was kind of really how Levine Design came to be. It happened more than I realized it,
Yeah. Now, with that, and kind of tying into what you talked about earlier, there's a sense of having an eye for something, right? But then there's also knowing the person. And I'm sure, you meet people and they say, no, all I wear is black, like, go get me that. And you're like, well, maybe just try this, right? And like, I'm going to push the envelope a little bit. But there was something that you were picking up on. So talk a little bit about, one, catering to what the client was telling you they kind of wanted, but then also you being the professional and, helping them see what might look best for them.
Yeah, for sure. I think over time, I started realizing like they don't actually know what they need. They just know what they want. And so I think there's like a certain craft in any job, but especially creative and when you're helping people put their looks together, of still giving them what they want, but truly actually giving them what they need instead of just saying, I'm going to just do what you say. Like I would have clients, of course, back in the, especially, major Kardashian time of, I want to look like Kardashian and, find me a dress like this. And I would have to, mind my P's and Q's and be like, okay, and go find them something that, they felt like emulated that. But what I really knew what they were saying was that they wanted the confidence in their body and in the look and the way she carries herself and, what that design might look like. But not everybody can pull off a taped bandage dress, which by the way, like she is taped into literally. So, it's like, okay, so taking that, fantasy, putting with the reality of like, what's this going to be? And so finding things for them that would give them that confidence that maybe they wouldn't have tried. So like a good example of that would be Lisa Vanderpump. I dressed her for quite a bit and she lived in A-line dresses and that was her comfort zone. Every color, every style, every jewel, and it looked fabulous on her. But it was the same thing over and over and over again. And so one day I finally came to her home and I brought her a jumpsuit, a really pretty, deep plunging, blush color jumpsuit that had like really cool cape-like shoulders, like very dramatic, big wide leg, fitted in, in the waist area. And I said, let's try this. And she looked at me like I had probably 12 heads. And I was like, and in her sweet voice, it was like, oh, darling, that's not my style. And I was like, all right, I get that. And I was like, but trust me, like, let's just try it. Like, if you don't like it, we don't have to wear it, but let's try it because it's the same type of like neckline as what you wear with your dresses, but you're going to be wearing pants and it's a little more fitted, but like you totally can pull that off. And so let's just try. And luckily between her makeup artist and her hair team that had been there way longer than me and trusted me, they were like, just try it, just try it. So she did. And she loved it and she looked amazing. And we did all these editorial photos with it and ended up being like on a cover for which magazine now, I think it's CB Lux. And, a bunch of inside editorial images and everything. And so from there, she started wearing jumpsuits on Watch What Happens Live, on, Today's Show, on, Vanderpump Rules. I mean, the list goes on. And, it was all of a sudden that moment. I remember when Daily Mail actually did a whole write-up about it and said like, she stuns in this, low, deep V plunging, neckline and jumpsuit that you would never think someone like her of her age could wear, but she makes it look like it was made for her. And I remember in that moment, like reading that and being like, and see, that's the shift, right? That and that is for her confidence. Of course, mine as well, being happy because I want my clients to be happy and, exuding confidence and feeling so good. But like truly for them to see like, oh, I can be in something else. Because I think going back to the beginning of our conversation, we get stuck in the comfort zone so easy in everything in life, this routine, this pattern. And that's how the programs are formed because we start to think that that's the only way to do things. And it's like, that is not true. We just program ourselves to think that that is true. And so it's the same as like something you love clothing wise. Like I do this too. I have some things and I'm like, I have 3 of them. And then I'm like, and that's enough. I don't need to have it in every single color
Yeah.
because I'm going to get stuck in only this silhouette and I don't
Yeah.
need to get stuck there. And I think people don't realize that even that is a program. And so you have to be conscious of like, how can I get out of my comfort zone?
Yeah.
And how can I, be feeling good in what I'm wearing, but still be adventurous too, which is why actually over the last, year, I rebranded as an intuitive stylist because I started recognizing that I really do have that intuition besides design ability to put looks together of like really helping people understand what it means to be like conscious in their closet and have like recognition of like what their closet is doing for them and what the clothes they're wearing is doing. And like we spoke to the color
Yeah.
and all these things, and I started realizing that from all the different conversations that I was having with my clients, because I had to almost take the leap before them for them to see, oh, I can do this and I can
Yeah.
show up this way. And actually, it's even better than I thought it was going to be.
I love it. Yeah, a changing moment for my style of fashion. I'm from a small town of 7,000 people, so I mean, it's a lot of like jeans and flannels, and like anything outside of that's kind of weird. But I was in Scottsdale with some friends, and we were at a polo shop, and there were these pink shorts, and I just thought, oh my gosh, these are amazing. And I go, and my buddy is from Dallas. He goes, well, just buy them. I go, dude, I can't wear pink shorts back home, man. Like I'm gonna get laughed at every single place I go. They'll be asking, did you steal your girlfriend's shorts? Like I can't do it. And he just said to me, literally, I'll never forget. He just goes, it's not about what you wear, it's about how you wear it. And I was like, well, I would wear it with confidence. So I got him, and that opened up
Good
my
for
eyes to, yeah,
you.
that opened up my eyes though to being like, yeah, it's, and now tying into what you're saying though is there's probably some subconscious like, well, something about the pink was something that, I wanted to wear or was connecting with me that day. So I love it on the
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and
style.
pink. Yeah, exactly. And I love that. And pink, for most people is a color of love, right? And of receiving and
Mm.
of, compassion. And so maybe you are wanting to either exude that or you were wanting to feel that for yourself in
Yeah.
that moment, whatever it may be. Sometimes we don't realize how a color can actually show up for us until we actually step in it. So I actually love that story.
Yeah. There we go. Well, now you've been doing all this work behind the camera, and then this TV show at Bravo comes about called Stripped, and we're now in front of the camera. So just talk a little bit about how the show came to be, and you had referenced it earlier, some of the key takeaways that you had from being on it.
Yeah. So before I was on the show, I was doing I was getting asked to be on camera as a fashion expert and lifestyle expert, doing different national and local segments, talking about fashion and trends, what my clients were wearing, as well as different lifestyle, just items and trends of what you could have fashion, beauty wise in your home and that sort of thing. So that was kind of the first step into the TV world.
Yeah.
And then, this was a whole nother realm of like reality docuseries, I guess, if you will. And I had been like, on random like housewives and from roles, like when I was dressing people or like you saw me in the background, like dressing someone for a second or whatever. So
Yeah.
I wasn't like fully new to it, but I definitely was not like in the forefront of being like on the show and being a main character, if you will. And so basically, the team at Bravo was like, hey, we're doing this documentary. It's all about having everything, taken away from you. We think as a celebrity stylist, it would be really cool as an experiment to see how you handle that. And I was just like, no, thank you. I didn't want everything. Like I was so in clothing at that time. I was so attached to material at that time.
Yeah.
I was just like, no, 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 no. I don't want any of that taken away. And my husband thought it would be good for me. He was right. And other people other people around me did too. And so I said, okay, sure, let's do it. And I thought to myself, well, hey, and press, there's no such thing as bad press, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, okay, I'll do it. My team was all about it. So sure. The whole idea later on of them taking our clothes and being naked was not originally truly discussed. So that was a big surprise.
Yeah.
And that was a very vulnerable surprise. I don't think you realize, talk about sitting with yourself when
Yeah.
you're actually naked, on camera and sitting truly with yourself without anything, because they take everything away from you. Our home was like literally bare, didn't even feel like our home. and then you're naked, it's a very vulnerable feeling.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if everybody knows what, like, I know it's becoming a little more trending term, but shadow work is like, you're seeing your shadow, you're having to deal with your stuff and see your own stuff and then work through it. I think that's what started happening for me without
Mm.
realizing it with the show, even though I was like doing this show because it was for their entertainment and what they were creating. I
Yeah.
was still living it. And I think that was actually like the beginning of my journey of recognizing, like what we spoke to earlier, of like not being present, not actually showing up in my life the way I needed to, only showing up for my clients, but not for myself.
Mm.
And it really took me on a journey, like a self, love journey and a self-reflection journey that I don't think I was honestly like even aware that I was going to go on. Right. But again, it's like those moments now looking back that I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful that that
Yeah.
happened, because I really believe it made me so much more conscious of everything I'm doing now. It's made me more present. It's made me more grateful to understand so much more of just my everyday life, of not being in a program and just continuing the same patterns over and over again and wondering, why it's the same results. And the show was, like I said, everything taken away for you for 21 days. So each day you asked to get something back. So it was like, at first in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to ask to get my phone back and I'm going to get this back. And you're naked, right? I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh no, I need to get dressed. Like I am
Yeah.
not getting my phone back. I am not getting any technology. Like that will have to wait. And I think that was like a big aha moment for me of like, I don't need
Mm.
that. I actually
Yeah.
don't need that right now. Where even though all of us are, like you spoke to, Phil,
Yeah.
like distractions, scrolling all the time, right? We constantly distract ourselves with our phones, with our social media, with everything, with Netflix, the list goes on. We find so many ways to distract ourselves instead of bettering ourselves and working on ourselves, because it's way easier to do that. And so I think going through that moment really made me start reflecting of like, what is important and like, what am I ignoring? And a big part of that was that my husband really wanted to have a family. And I kept saying like, hey, like we're, not like doing this yet. I'm not ready yet. I have my
Yeah.
career. I have this, I have that, and I had to really like sit with myself to like say, okay, but when are you going to actually make that choice? Because you keep saying you're going to do it, but then you keep pushing another year, another year, another year, And so
Yeah.
long story short, after the show, it really gave me, I think, the confidence, but also the vulnerability to step into and say, all right, we're just going to try and see what happens. And aha, there she was, short, very, very quickly, which was not expected, but was such a blessing. And that was really that start for me of like that real inner reflection journey, and like, how am I going to show up? Because I want to show up, authentically and, as highest self as I can for my kids, right? Like
Yeah.
daughter to see that like I'm in a place where I'm actually happy with myself and I'm not faking it. I'm actually in a place of truly owning who I am authentically on all levels, good and bad, and working with myself and not pretending. I think it's so easy to continue to pretend and stay in this like comfortable, like, wheelhouse, if you will. But
Yeah.
then your children,
Mm.
man, are they the lessons? And then they come in and they shake it all up and it's like, oh, I don't deal with this, oh, that triggers me, why is that, oh, this is, it's like the list goes on. And so that was a huge part of, my journey. And then we spoke to the postpartum depression, but that came from a very traumatic birth with her.
Mm.
Long story, I wanted to have a natural, water birth,
Yeah.
and after 42 hours wound up in a C-section. And it was a very intense time and everything that happened for me. But what I realized later on, after doing a lot of soul searching and a lot of work, was that it really wasn't her birth that actually was any of it. That was the catalyst of that. But it was the fact that I hadn't dealt with my grandmother's passing. It was the fact that I had been so numbed out in grief and everything I was going through that I had gone full throttle in my career and nothing else, because distractions. I didn't want
Yeah.
to deal with me or deal with the grief or deal with the sadness or the anger. I just wanted to keep going and pretend nothing was happening until the universe forced me to acknowledge everything that was happening. And that's where everything came up for me. But I was so
Yeah.
grateful now that it did, because that moment is what shifted me so much. And now like I said, I'm more present. I have so much more inner peace. That's why I decided to become certified as a breathwork practitioner and coach, because I'm like, everybody needs to know what this work is. Everyone needs to experience this. And so, I think that when we have those moments that we go through in our lives, in those moments, it's really hard to actually see the good. It's really hard to actually see that something, could be on the other side, the light at the end of the tunnel. But
Yes.
the more we push forward and the more we allow ourselves to say, okay, I'm going to be in this for a moment, right? Like you said, but I'm not going to let this moment last. And then I'm going to decide to make the switch. That moment that we decide, everything else starts to show up for us, even if we don't see it right away. And that has been my ever evolving journey of really still now just trusting and having the faith that the more I show up, the more I change the programs, I change the thoughts, the more I breathe, the more I'm present with myself, the more I'm present with my kids, my husband, the more things shift. And I don't get stuck in the old patterns of what Allie used to do, because I finally now understand when one of my favorite spiritual mentors, Wayne Dyer, would say, it's you who is in the way. It's you, no one else. It's you. Yep. And I used to hear that and be like, what? I don't get that. Like, no, I'm doing everything. And then I was like, oh no, it is me. Like, hi, I am the problem, And it's like, I think when you can finally come to that place of like, I'm the problem, but guess what the blessing of that is? I get to change that if I really want to, and I get to shift forward and make the changes. And so that would be really my message to someone is like, if you're sick of where you're at, decide today that this is when you make the change.
I love it. Well, Allie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Just a lot of just phenomenal wisdom bombs. Whether you're needing breath work, you're trying to get some fashion advice, you're trying to be a better, mom or person. We cover it all today. So, Allie, thanks so much, and I'm excited to watch your journey and all the amazing things you're doing. And we'll have to do this again in like 2 years as you just continue to build your story and highlight all the new things that have happened after that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me in this conversation. And I really appreciate it. If everybody, has any questions or just needs connection, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure everything will be in Phil's show notes, but truly just know, you're not alone. And I know it sounds cliche, but just breathe. And I promise the universe will take care of everything else.
I love it. Thanks, Allie.
Thank you.